I have stopped using email for my students. This has been one thing that was a little bit, my students have been a bit shocked by, but now I tell them email is for urgent communication. So if something is going on in their lives or home lives or something serious, of course, and they put urgent in the subject line, and I respond to the emails right away. And we've had, Marta and I teach together, and we've had situations like that. But for everything else, generally speaking, the answer is probably on Canvas. It's probably in the handbook. And I encourage them to try to figure that out. What I also encourage is I have an online discussion board that runs the whole time where my students can actually help each other, because often it's what was said at this date or what was this announcement, so the students can answer each other, and then I provide a window where I check in on the discussion board. So there's just a time and date where they know once a week for 15 minutes I go through it. That has helped alleviate my very chaotic inbox by quite a bit, and it does mean that the student emails that matter are the ones that really come to me. And then along with that, I recognize that students still have questions sometimes. So like Chip does, I have an office hour. I don't make the office hour at a particularly convenient time. Admittedly, Friday at 9 a.m. is not the most popular time slot. But what I find is that the students who really need it come. And I tell them they can have 10 minutes or so, and usually that's plenty of time. So if they have questions about an assignment, because like Chip, I use rubric grading, they can quickly get more one-to-one feedback, which is far better than anything I've written anyway, because I can show them what was the challenge with the sentence they had or something like that. And at the same time, it really makes, as my former PhD supervisor over a decade ago said to me, is it separates the chaff from the wheat, right? The people that really need it do come. So I've got rid of email with my students, and I use an office hour, and I have really, that's made a big difference in sort of the time I spend outside of the classroom. That's my main tip. But then I have a few other things I wrote down because, well, I was excited for today. So one of the things I heard last year, we did an event last year that really stuck with me on the art of feedback. And Dominic Slausmans came, and she spoke about giving feedback to students. And one of the things I struggle with is how many scriptsies I'm supervising. I have so many students and so many papers coming in, and I feel sometimes I don't know how to limit the amount of feedback I want to give them. And so now I'm trying to make my students more autonomous, and I say to them, tell me where you need feedback. Point to me in your draft and give me 3 questions in the one area that you need feedback in. So rather than me reading all of it in detail and planning to write heavy comments, now it's really in their space. What do you need from me? And that has really changed the balance between teacher-student in doing this and really put it more on them to be thoughtful about how to use my time. And that's also made me more efficient in my scriptsy work. Another one is that, oh, this is an interesting typo that I made. So consider presentations in lieu of papers. So one thing I found is that I sometimes had papers. And I went through all of my classes, and I looked at my learning goals. And sometimes what I realized is I had a paper that a presentation would work just as well as, and it would meet the exact same learning goals. Not always, because sometimes my learning goal was about writing, right? But in a case where writing was not my learning goal, per se, a presentation worked much easier. I could grade it with a rubric in class, and grading was done, instead of having 25 papers, I had 5 group presentations. That changed completely some of the classes I've done, and still it meets the goal I had for what they need. So maybe look at what you're doing and identify when writing is needed, and maybe when it isn't necessarily needed. As Chip mentioned, I also embrace the feedback rubric approach. It takes me a little bit longer to make the rubric at the beginning, but it pays off immensely in terms of feedback later. I'm also reevaluating all of my paper assignment lengths. I don't know about you, but when I grade, usually by the 2nd page, I have a sense of their grade. And yet somehow I have an 8-page assignment, and I think, wow, I actually probably knew this more quickly. Not always the case. A writing-intensive program or a scriptsy is different. But in many cases, 4 pages teaches them to write more succinct and find their argument a little bit more quickly. And at the same time, it alleviates my teaching time that I'm spending on grading and still meets their learning goal.